beaded with pinholes of light against the greying sky. As the ferry ploughed on, carving its path through the waves, the land took form and seemed to rise out of the sea like the hump of a great creature yet to raise its head. Bright points arranged themselves into clusters, huddled into the bay at the foot of the cliff, though the intermittent sweep of the lighthouse remained separate at the furthest reach of the harbour wall. The only passenger on the deck leaned out, gripping the rail tighter with both hands, anchored by the smooth grain of the wood beneath her fingers. Doggedly, the ferry rose and fell, hurling up a cascade of spray each time it crested a wave and dropped away. Wind whipped her hair into salt strands that stung her lips. She wore a battered flying jacket and pulled up the collar against the damp as she planted her feet, swaying with the motion of the boat, determined to take it all in from here as they docked, and not through the smeared window of the passenger lounge downstairs, with its fug of wet coats and stewed tea. Outside, the wind tasted of petrol and brine. She pushed her fringe out of her face and almost laughed in disbelief when the noise of the engines fell away and the men in orange waterproofs began throwing their coils of rope and shouting orders at one another as the boat nosed a furrow through oily water to bump alongside the pier. 2 days of travelling and it was almost over. She tried not to think about the old saying that the journey mattered more than the arrival. She tried not to think about what she had left behind, thousands of miles away. The ferry terminus hardly warranted the name. There was a car park and one low pebble-dashed building, the word cafe flaking off a sign above the door. She edged down the gangplank, pushing her wheeled art case in front of her and yanking the large suitcase behind like 2 unwilling toddlers, a travel easel in its holder unwieldy under her arm. Each time it hit the rail as she turned to wrestle with one bag or other, she was grateful that now, in mid-October, the ferry was not crowded, so that at least she did not have to worry about how many of her fellow passengers she had maimed in the process of herding her luggage ashore. At the head of the slipway, she saw a man in a leather jacket, its zip straining over a comfortable paunch. He was holding a homemade cardboard sign that read, Zoe Adams. As soon as his eyes locked onto hers and met with recognition, he broke into a broad smile and started waving madly at her, as if he were trying to attract her attention through a crowd, though she was only yards away, and the few remaining foot passengers had all dispersed. She smiled back, hesitant. He was around her own age, she thought, early 40s, with thinning blonde hair and a round, open face, cheeks reddened by island weather or a taste for drink, or perhaps both together. He approached her with an anxious smile.
Mrs. Adams?
She hesitated. She could have let it go, but there would be only more questions later on. Actually, it's Miss.
Eh?
Zoe tilted her head in apology. I'm not a Mrs.
Oh.
He looked afraid he had offended.
My mistake. You're no married then?
She made a non-committal noise and set down one of her cases so that she could stretch out a hand. You must be Mr. Drummond.
Mick, please.
He beamed again, grasping her fingers and shaking them with a vigour intended to convey the sincerity of his welcome.
I'm the one who's been sending all the emails.
He released her hand and held up the sign with a self-conscious laugh. The wind almost snatched it from his grip.
My wife's idea. I told her it's not as if there's going to be hundreds of them pouring off the boat, but she said it would spare you feeling lost when you first set foot here.
Zoe smiled. If only that were all it took. It was very thoughtful of her.
Aye, she's like that, Kay. You'll meet her. Here, let me take those.
He tucked the sign under his arm and hefted her cases into each hand, nodding across the car park to an old Land Rover, its flanks crusted with mud. Zoe looked back at the harbour as he loaded her bags into the trunk. Through the lit windows of the ferry, she could see the shapes of people cleaning.